there's so many issues where it's so great to play off the emotions of people of look at how awful the other side is, because they are going to take this away. Insert issue here. It's the very similar playbook, but it's mostly it seems to me to win elections, because once you win, or once the elections die down, or when something new is in the news cycle, nobody actually moves to solve this problem.
Welcome to the Unspeakable Podcast. I'm your host, Meghan Daum. My guest is writer, comedian, news commentator, all around interesting, sort of unusual person. Well, I don't know about unusual, but definitely defying of stereotypes. She contains multitudes. Kat Timpf. Kat has a new book out. It's called I Used to Like You Until How Binary Thinking Divides Us. And she's going to talk about it in this conversation. We cover a lot of things that I know listeners of this podcast appreciate. Problems with audio capture. Yeah, audio capture is also a problem. Audience capture, ideological warfare, how culture wars are destroying friendships and relationships, and basically the problem with everything. You know what I mean? This is a great conversation, and I think you will enjoy it. So here's Kat Timpf. Kat Timpf, welcome to the Unspeakable.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We're here to talk about your book, I Used to Like You Until ... A few people have said that to me over the last couple of years. So it's not an uncommon phrase. So this book comes out of your experience in media. You're the co-host of Gutfeld on Fox, and you're a Fox News analyst.
Mm-hmm.
You've been writing and commenting on politics for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And this book gets at something that so many people have been grappling with for the last few years, which is that tribalism is not only ruining the country and the world, but it's ruining relationships,
Mm-hmm.
friendships, professional ties, all kinds of connections. When you set out to write this book, was that the concept that was animating it, or did it emerge as you were writing?
That was definitely the concept that was animating it, but it was also just more from my personal experience as well. I got the idea for this book as I was on my tour for my first book, and just going around. I mean, I'm going back out on tour this weekend, and I just go all around the country. I mean, I'm going all around the country, but I was going all around the country. I'm talking, from Portland, Oregon to Midland, Texas. Places that are very different. But I just kept finding what I'd already, kind of suspected or known to be true, which is that many of us really want a lot of the same things. And we really just kind of differ on how to get there. And, I'm often in this position where I can see it in real time, how people can think that one viewpoint or one association tells them everything they need to know about you. Being an independent who is on Fox News, I will get it from both sides. If I'm critical of somebody on the right, then the audience, I'll hear from them. They'll be very upset about that I should be fired, etc. But then
Always.
Right. It's never, I didn't like what you had to say about that. It's always, you have to be fired. So, but then there's people on the left who won't even talk to me at all because they see that I work at Fox News, and in their minds it tells them everything that they need to know about me. And it's just not accurate. It's not accurate. Issues are really complex and nuanced a lot of the time, but people are nuanced all of the time. But so much of our discourse acts as if that's not the reality.
Right. That's why my merch says nuanced AF.
Yeah, I love that.
All the time.
Yeah.
You've been at Fox since 2017. Is that right?
No, I think it was 2015.
Oh, before then.
Yeah,
okay.
Before then.
So when you came to work there, was it different than you expected? Like, what was the environment that you walked into?
Yeah. So, I guess yes and no, because I've always worked with Gutfeld. So I work in more the comedy realm of things, but also, and this in all my writing, in both my first book and in this book, I also share a lot of very personal stories about my life. And you can see through my writing that I've lived a lot. I've met a lot of different people. I've been in a lot of different places, a lot of different situations, been through a lot of things. So I feel very lucky that I get to know so many different people, and I know, I'm not operating off of assumptions a lot of the time. Um, my experience at Fox is a lot different than what you would maybe see, in terms of what people think Fox News is. Um, I'm independent. I've never been told I can't say something. Uh, I've I've always been welcome to share my views. And I also have a lot of, even though I'm independent, I'm not a Republican, I'm not MAGA. I have a lot of friends who are, that I've met from working here. And you really learn that and it's research backs this up too, right? I mean, I write about this in the book, where there's this perception gap now between the parties, where there's this huge gap between what people in the opposite party think about the people in the other party. For example, people are way off in estimating how many people in the opposite party hold so-called extreme views
Yeah.
than actually do. So we're really just destroying what could be fulfilling relationships, opportunities to work together. We're living outside of what is actually reality. And people are getting angry over all this stuff, or that's a lot of time not even real.
Yeah, no, I know. A lot of that YouGov polling I find fascinating too,
Yeah.
because there's sort of like a huge percentage of people on the right think that a really huge percentage of people on the left are in unions, right? For example, and it's actually a very small amount of people are in unions at this point.
Yeah, or a
at least.
huge percentage of people on the left think that people on the right are really wealthy, but it's not the case. And,
No, not anymore.
or people are shocked to see how many people on the left are shocked to be people on the right think immigration is good, or well-controlled immigration is good. And the people on the right are shocked to see how few people on the left want the border to be totally open. I mean, people are just totally off. And the sad thing is, the only way to kind of combat this is by actually getting to know people who are different from you. So this book is basically kind of a guide for how to do that. And also I show how to do that. And I think that one of the main ways to do that is what I do in the book, which is being extremely vulnerable and sharing things about myself, because I think when you're willing to show that you're human, it's a lot more likely that people are going to be able to see you as a human.
Yeah. And it seems like an obvious point, but in this sort of moment in the history of human civilization, people are not in person. Like the whole idea of what is personal and what is a personal experience has been like reimagined in this radical and disturbing way. I mean, you have some very funny stories about people deciding they don't like you anymore, or just kind of, micro-canceling you. Early in the book, you have a very funny story when you're single, you actually, you have an encounter with a woman, you have this kind of, sexy night.
Yeah.
And then can you explain what happens?
Yeah. So this is one of the first stories I tell in the book. And I had actually never talked about, having dated women before this book, because openly I talk about it to everyone in my life, and also people I've met for 5 minutes. It's not a secret. I just never really went public with it because I didn't want the public to make a big deal about it. But I thought that this story in particular was just too good and too illustrative of my point to not include. So there was this girl that I had a thing for a long time. We'd kind of been back and forth, we'd been flirty, we'd kissed before, whatever. But I knew she was going to be at this New Year's Eve party. So I went to this New Year's Eve party, even though I was here co-hosting one of the New Year's Eve things. So I was really late, but I went there, brought her home with me. It was going so well that she was still there the next night. And then her family just showed up unannounced to collect her from my home. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. I talked to our mutual friend who had the party, and she said that her mom, who's a gender studies professor, I'm sure there was more to it than just this, but she was horrified that she was at the apartment of somebody who had been hosting something on Fox News, to the point that it was that urgent of a situation. And just think about how ridiculous that is. I wasn't being sexist or anti-woman. I wasn't being homophobic, right, that night. But she wasn't thinking. That's the thing. And this woman's a professor. She's very smart. But that's what happens when we kind of don't actually think. We just kind of react to these buzzwords oh, Fox News bad, I got to go get my daughter. I got
to call the cops, a
without
wellness check.
There's these people at my door, and I was like,
how did they know? Wait, okay, but how did she post it on Instagram or something?
No, I think it must have been through the mutual friend.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. because I think this is a while that her phone was, something like that. So I wasn't expecting it. I don't think she was expecting it. And then she and I, it didn't work. We went on to see each other several times. I think I say this in the book, and I've spoke to her recently. She congratulated me on my pregnancy, but we had a relationship where if anyone asked about it, we can only kind of describe it as like, how much time do you have? It was definitely far from the last time I saw her anyway. But I was such a bad boy, I guess, because I worked at Fox News. But I think it's just so illustrative of this point. That's what happens when this binary thinking, when you pick the side and then you stop thinking because all of it's already been done for you. So that's how things like this can happen, because it's not like the story itself is unique in terms of it's my unique experience, but I'm far from the only person to have something like that happen.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, we don't have to dwell on this, but did you have encounters with her mother, the gender studies professor, later? Or you didn't go to any family dinners or anything?
No.
Okay, that would be, you could break bread together and come to some sort of detente. So you started at Fox around 2015. What was the climate like in terms of these dynamics at that time?
I remember because I was working at National Review also around the same time. I remember for a while, Trump was like, it was funny.
Right. It wasn't serious.
Right. It was like, this is not serious. This person is not going to be the nominee. I mean, president wasn't even a whisper of a thought in anyone's head. Nobody was like, he's not going to be the nominee. It was kind of a joke for a little bit. And there was this division of people who were for him and people who were against him. But everything wasn't quite as serious. And then when Trump won, obviously, things changed a lot. My views never changed. There's things about him that I can't stand. There's things about him where I'm like, oh, has a point with that. I kind of view it on an issue by issue basis, just like I do with anybody. But I have started having problems in my personal life because I didn't think he was literally Hitler, or I didn't. I lost a very close friend, and it was because I got sick of. Part of it was I really got sick of him going after me publicly in front of people when we were at parties together about the fact that I worked at Fox News and like everybody's drinking. And I'm just like, and this is my friend that I've known for over a decade and my views hadn't changed at all. But it was, for example, I think, yes, this was in 2020. I used to have a comedy advice show on Fox Nation called Sincerely Kat. And it was like, people would write in, we'd offer advice. It was kind of like a fun, lighthearted show. We'd do comedy sketches. I had the Libertarian candidate that year, Joe Jorgensen, on the comedy advice show. And he decided to confront me about that at a party. Is it really right for you to have giving her a platform right now? Right now, meaning when, we must defeat Trump above all else. I ultimately voted for her. I didn't want to vote for Trump or Biden. But I mean, that was just like, it's the worst thing ever. And I hadn't changed.
Right.
I'd always believed the same things. I mean, I believe, and I don't see it as wasting my vote. I believe that a lot of our problems come from the two-party system. So it feels great for me to vote against it.
Yeah. There was definitely the all hands on deck feeling after Trump was elected. Like, yeah. At the time I was working on a book about kind of the way that feminism had gone off the rails and the whole sort of, badass girl boss kind of overcorrection. And I assumed that Hillary would be the president. And I assumed I could write this book and it would all be fine. Right. That women could take a little ribbing and suddenly, no, there was absolutely no lane for any kind of like discussion or nuance. And it was really frustrating. I mean, as a journalist, I found it incredibly frustrating as a writer, just as a thinking person. It was very hard to operate just sort of in the intellectual space starting around that time. Well, even before that time, as far as I was concerned, but it was really bad then. I mean, I guess the fact that you were was being at Fox, did that make it easier or harder? Like, God forbid if you had been working for MSNBC or something like that, like how would things have been different?
Well, the thing for me is no matter where I go, like, I don't fit neatly into one box or the other box. So it's always going to be, people are always going to have an issue with me in some way or another. And election times are always the worst and the weirdest, because whoever loses blames me for the loss, because I didn't, it's my fault, because I vote third party. And the reason I do that is I just don't want to vote. I think that both sides are too big of government for me. I don't feel comfortable voting for somebody who doesn't believe I should have rights that I believe I am entitled to. I also think that just the two-party system enables so much corruption, where, we don't have conversations. And it's just, okay, well, and I write about this in my book a little bit, where it's like, you say something that Trump did, and then a Republican will respond and say something that the Bidens did. And they'll never actually address what the other side's saying, because they're just lobbing. And that's how these politicians get away with all this stuff, because they're always going to have their team backing them up no matter what. So I think that it would be it's challenging to be an independent thinker anywhere. I am lucky here at Fox that I've never been in a position where I've wanted to say something and I've been told that I can't. So I'm very lucky that I've learned all the time just how lucky I truly am that that's the case. But it still doesn't mean it's still hard, because independent thinking, people can't even perceive it sometimes anymore, where people are so used to the us versus them, where if I criticize Kamala, everyone's like, okay, well, you're MAGA. And if I criticize Trump, everyone's like, okay, well, you're a communist. And it's like, I'm not any of these things. I'm just me.
Can you tell a few stories of the kinds of relationship friction situations that you've gotten into over the years that you tell in the book? I mean, you had a boyfriend, like an ex-boyfriend, who, you posted something. He took down his Instagram post acknowledging his affiliation with you.
Yeah, I was sort of seeing this rapper for a while. And I think the way I describe it is like, we said I love you, and he met my family, but it was casual, which it's definitely, everybody gets the picture. But it was over a few years, and I had been in his hotel room wearing his sweats, and he posted a picture of me on his Instagram story, and then he deleted it. And I very much suspect he'd been getting messages from people about, how I work at Fox, because he did admit to me a few times, oh, what would people think, that kind of a thing. You work because of our fan bases. But the thing is, okay, like, maybe our brands didn't align the way that you would think, but also we aligned as people. We got along great as people. And also, I met him because I slid into his DM, so I was a fan. So that should also tell you something, but he was clearly, and he was actually, and I'm not going to identify him, but he actually later told me he had regretted treating me the way he did. And I'm always kind of rooting for him. And so I don't think he's like a bad guy. But it's also not like he was the only guy. I mean, I write also about my friend, whenever you have a friend who breaks up with their boyfriend, you always hear all the stuff that, like, they didn't tell you while the relationship was going on. I had a very close friend. I still have a very close friend who was in a very long relationship with a Hollywood director. And both of them came to my wedding, which only had 30 people at it. It was really, really small because it was during COVID. Some of my friends didn't get +1s. Most didn't. Nobody got a +1. It was only if the couple was also my friend, and even friend, there was, like, it caused so many issues with people who like weren't able to come. She came and he came as well. And after they broke up, I found out that he wouldn't send her pictures that he took of the two of us together, because he was very afraid that she would post them. And then people would see that his girl was sharing air with somebody who worked at Fox News, and then that would affect his work. And for a while, it hurt my feelings. And I was thinking, I thought he really liked me. And then the more I thought about it, I came to the realization that he did like me. He did like me. I was probably his favorite of her friends. We did have a friendship. He thought I was funny. He loved being around me. The pretend thing was that he was pretending that he didn't. And, I think that as divided as we are actually not as divided as we think, because there's a lot of people like that. there's a lot of people who there are huge gaps between what people believe and what people say they believe. There's research that shows that. But also just in my personal life, I have people who DM me who are famous people and be like, oh, I love you on the show, or I love this joke. And I'm like, cool, can I do your podcast? And they're like, nah, well, I don't really want to get like political. I'm like, it's just my existence is political because of where I work, right? And so people, as big as the problem is, people are pretending that the problem is bigger.
Yes.
And it's crazy.
Yes. And it's so much about preserving their livelihood. I mean, this example that you just described, you see that so often with people who have big jobs and big careers in industries that are still pretty captured, or at least somehow beholden to like some kind of progressive performance. I'm not even going to give them credit for like a substantive alignment. But yeah, like, have you had other examples of this? I mean, have you had people ever just say to you, I'm going to agree with you privately, but you must understand that my job, I need to pay my mortgage and I need to pay my kids' tuition, and I simply cannot be public about my
and I'll find
relationship
this
with
out from third parties sometimes as well. I had a friend who was at a party one time, and he said that he had people privately come up to him and say that they were such a fan of me, but please not to tell anybody at the party. And that happened with several different people. And to me, it's like, guys, the thing is I don't live my life that way at all. And it's great. It's liberating. It's freeing. It's also scary, but I don't know. Life is short. Like, we're all dying. People are living so scared, and it's something that I don't understand. But yeah, there's also people who have told people, I can't like any of her jokes on Instagram because then I don't want people to see that I like their post. I mean, I'm independent totally, but I have, my views that don't fit into either side. But I have friends that are, obviously I work here. I have friends that are very MAGA. They love Trump. They love the guy. They love him. And I disagree with them on a lot of things, but it doesn't affect our friendship. I have friends who work at MSNBC. I have one friend in particular who I write about in the book. He's like to the left of AOC. He's one of my closest friends. I talked to him as recently as yesterday. I talk to him most days. And I can't imagine my life without a lot of these relationships. I mean, just because you have a different view than somebody does on guns, for example, doesn't mean that you are going to have nothing in common with that person. I mean, we've been conditioned to believe otherwise. We've been conditioned to believe that just because someone's in the opposite political party that you're going to have nothing in common with them. But it's simply not true. It benefits a lot of the power structures, though. It benefits politicians. It benefits media. The more divided we are, the more power and control that politicians can have. And also just fear is sexy. It's so much more impactful, whether you're in media or whether you're a politician, to just say, hey, like this policy or this, it's how much more attention grabbing and motivating is it to say, vote for me or the country's over because of the other people. I mean, that's extremely motivating. So I understand why they do it, but people are being manipulated.
How much do you buy into the thinking that this is sort of all part of a larger plan, like the rise of social media, the way this binary thinking is eroding like actual policy, like, elevating a very small handful of powerful people? I'm never quite sure what to think of this, because I think, I'll really like never attribute to conspiracy what is, usually the result of just incompetence. I just botched that quote, but I mean, the logic is clear. On the other hand, it does really seem like we're in a moment of perfect storm in terms of disinformation and real destructive kinds of cultural dynamics.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, really, like I said, fear can be very, very, very motivating. I think that, also it's really, you see why people are attracted to it as well. So let's just say you're a Republican and the Democrats are all evil. Then you're good just because you're not one of them. And both sides obviously do that. I mean, Democrats like, oh, I'm not a Republican, so then you're automatically good. So that people can be attracted to that. And the problem is that's not it's not reality, right? I mean, I write about research in this book that, moral outrage is often rooted in self-interest and not altruism. So if people feel bad about a problem and they feel powerless over a problem, they're more motivated to then attack a third party target over it. And then they feel better when they do. And how great for politicians, right? I mean, again, I think there's so many issues that are beneficial to politicians, and they're so good at playing off our emotions that it's almost better for them to not solve things, right? I mean, think about, remember the Dreamers? Do you remember what a hot issue that was, that Trump was going to take away the protection?
And
of
everybody
the Dreamers?
liked the Dreamers. It was pretty
I'm
nonpartisan.
and I do too. I mean, I think that people, they're born here, they've been here forever, et cetera, et cetera. But I have no power over anything in terms of cementing their protections. Congress does. Congress is the only body that can actually cement their protections. We've heard nothing about it. Has anybody put forth? They could do that. They could
explain what the Dreamers are, just for listeners
it's
who
the
don't know.
Dream Act. So it's a specific set of criteria. People who came here, very young, and so they won't get deported.
If their parents, they're not. Their parents brought them.
Exactly.
Their parents are undocumented. They were brought into this country when they're like a baby or small child, and
they had no say. And obviously, as most babies,
so
about where you're going. They've lived there their whole life. I think, but there's so many examples like that. Even with abortion. I mean, there's been Roe v. Wade. Okay, people say they're gonna codify it all the time, but have you made a move to do so? I think that, there's so many issues where it's so great to play off the emotions of people of look at how awful the other side is, because they are going to take this away. It's insert issue here. It's the very similar playbook, but it's mostly it seems to me to win elections, because once you win, or once the elections die down, or once something new is in the news cycle, nobody actually moves to solve this problem. And it's just, it just seems so obvious to me that, I mean, I don't want to say politicians are incapable of caring about an issue, but to me, it seems obvious that a lot of the time it's politically beneficial for them to seem to care about an issue, and they don't actually do anything about it.
Yeah.
Once it gets to be time.
I know you're not a politician, and presumably you're not like super close friends with that many politicians, but
none, I would say.
Do you think that they started out as believing in something and wanting to make a change, and then something happens along the way, lobbyists just, like an appetite for power kind of overtakes them, or the system is so broken that they can't actually have any effect, so they're just gonna get as much power as they can? Or are they really phonies to begin with? I mean, I know this is a sweeping generalization, but what do you think their motivation is for going into politics, a lot of them?
Yeah, I really don't know what their motivation is, but I think that once they get in, their motivation is to stay there. And I think that, so there's one ex-politician who I would say is a friend of mine, who would be Justin Amash, who I write about in the book. Look at what happened to him.
We should say who he is. So he's the libertarian. He was. Did he actually officially run for president? He was going to.
No, but he was a congressman, and he was a Republican congressman in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And he broke with the Republican Party in supporting one of the impeachments of Donald Trump. And he was a complete pariah after that. Some of this same organizations who had been his major donors were supposed to be organizations that were for, free markets or things that have nothing to do with his vote in terms of that, or with his, opinion on that, abandoned him. And he didn't have any money. And he became that one thing, even though he can continue to be the most, if not among the most fiscally conservative members of Congress. I mean, he was just staying true to what he thought, and nobody could say, all right, I disagree with him on this one thing, but this doesn't define him as a person. It did. And I think a lot of people are afraid to break with the party on either side because of that. Instead of just saying, you know what, I disagree with him here. I don't think that he's right about this thing with Trump, but I see his value. It's crazy to me. And I feel like he can't be the only Republican who had that opinion. I'm sure all the time there are politicians who disagree with the prevailing party narrative on something, but they know that if they break with the party, they very well might be fucked. So they just don't. And that's how we get to where we are.
So they've been dealing with cancel culture since well before anybody else was.
Yeah, like you're a traitor. And it's like, I think that it's so pathetic how much it is valued to be a perfect an alignment. I mean, if you're not being honest about what you believe, then you're a liar.
Yeah.
I mean, how is that better to be a liar?
It is incredibly frustrating when you break it down. So what is Justin Amash doing now? He's not the focus of this conversation, obviously, but he's out of politics?
He ran for the Republican nomination in Michigan and he lost. So that was very recently.
Do you
think
he's
very smart? He's a very smart guy. I mean, and it's and again, this is why it feels so good for me to vote against the two-party system because imagine if instead of just party machine versus party, this it was like, okay, what have you done? What do you believe? Accountability when you mess things up. I mean, all these things, we might have some hope of these things if it wasn't just I write in this book about how the conversations between parties aren't conversations. They're more of the inverse of the childhood. I know you are, but what am I?
Right.
It's like, I know I am, but what are you? Okay, my guy did this, but you know what? You're Trump did this. Oh yeah, well, Biden did this. And it's like, nobody ever addresses any issues.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I noticed that we're recording this on September 9th. I think it was just yesterday, the Harris campaign finally rolled out her policy proposals.
Mm-hmm.
So finally, some people we can comb through that at some point. But I mean, getting back to something like abortion, now Trump is saying that he would not support a national ban, for instance. He's also backing away from things like the 2025 project. What do you think about the extent to which people should believe that or not believe that?
About what he would actually do?
Yeah. Like, somebody like Trump, how do you take him seriously, but not literally, or the other way around?
Predict. It is very, very hard to predict. And that is something where I think that the abortion issue is why Republicans did so poorly in the midterms. So I do understand why he is trying to say, okay, I'm not trying to do this and this, but then there's the hyper conservative wing of the party who believes that IVF is murder. So then those people can be very loud on social media, right? And I hear from those people sometimes because I'm very open and I talk about the fact that I did freeze embryos with my husband. And it's just, it depends on who he listens to. It really does. But I think that it's very motivating. It's very motivating. People, I mean, even quietly, I think for a lot of people, and I personally just, your pregnancy is not my business. That's what my views are on it. But I think that I'm not surprised that I think politically it's smart for him to be moving in that direction. But I also think that, people might not trust it. I understand that, but I don't see him just based when you look at his life as a very socially conservative person.
Oh no, he's not a conservative. He's a radical. He's a radical anarchist, or he's incoherent, anarcho-incoherent.
It's very incoherent. And again, but everybody that's the thing. It's the parties. It's crazy now. I mean, we have the Dick Cheney endorsing Kamala, and Kamala's honored by the endorsement. I mean, whoa. If Dick Cheney endorsed me, I would be horrified.
Right.
But that's because I'm still anti-war. I mean, I was anti-war when Republicans were yelling at me about it. And now I'm anti-war, even though Democrats are the ones yelling at me about it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why it's so hard to predict, because it's just the parties don't really mean anything anymore.
No. And we have RFK going with Trump.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts about RFK Jr.?
I tend to like him, even though I think a lot of the stuff he says is crazy, or has said is crazy. Driving around with a dead bear in your car. I mean, he's a weird dude, right? But what I always liked about him, and what I hope we don't lose because he did endorse Trump, was his ability, and not just ability, but willingness to publicly evaluate policy for the sake of policy, and not because it was this candidates versus that candidates. I think that there's so little of that now. So, I mean, he said when he endorsed Trump, I still disagree with him on a lot, but I hope he's still able to do that, because I think a lot of people who wind up in Trump's orbit, whether they're directly in his orbit or they just have a career as a conservative pundit, they can be afraid to criticize him, because if they do, he will go after you.
Yeah.
And then everyone will go after you. And so people can be very afraid to criticize him. I really hope that he doesn't. I would like to, I really hope that doesn't happen in his case. And of course, there are people who they don't criticize him because they love him and whatever. There's people who really, as you know, die hard for Trump. But I think that there is a fear for some people to criticize him because of his reaction.
Yeah, I mean, listening to RFK Jr., like this whole idea that he's going to go in and work with them, and there's going to be a team of rivals, and they're going to deal with healthcare and sort of the health of the country and disease. I mean, that's tremendously exciting to a lot of people. And you're talking about costs of drugs and like this very big constellation of factors that are making us sick and driving up prices. And I mean, this is all connected, right? So, there's a part of me that listens to that and say, well, that would be great. Like if they can go in and actually bring some kind of new energy into this and not be so completely motivated. But like, wouldn't we be foolish to think that Trump is going to entertain anything even resembling a team of rivals? That is the opposite of his entire ethos.
I know, but I've said publicly for a long time that's what he needs.
Yes, it is.
He needs to have some people around him and keep I know it can be hard. I'm huge on that. I have people in my life that will say, that wasn't your best work, Kat. Like I have people in and it can hurt to hear.
Doesn't it feel good when they say it? Oh,
but these people, even Gutfeld, right? Him and I are very close, very different opinions on a lot of political issues, but also what I like about working for him is that if there's an issue, he comes to me directly with it and I can come directly to him and we will fight it out. And we have fought before. I mean, we've worked closely together for 9 years now, but then it's done. And then I know how he feels and he knows how I feel. And a lot of times I'll be like, I was better for hearing that. My family, I love to go to people who have known me for a long time and like, what do you think about this? That are not afraid to be like, because that makes you better. And I think, I understand, again, like I said, Trump, and he's also like, he's good at roasting people. So he can probably find the thing about you that bothers you and like really hurt your feelings. But if there was a team of rivals, that would be great. But it's not just Trump though. I think most politicians, they keep yes people around them.
Yeah.
Few of them are as transparent about it as Trump is.
Right.
But
Rudy Giuliani was an extreme case.
That way. Absolutely.
Yeah, well, right. Obviously, it would be ideal in any administration, but I cannot think of an administration least likely to endure that kind of thing than a Trump administration.
Because he's so transparent about, oh, yeah, well,
Yeah. I want to talk about your upbringing and your political kind of development. I know you grew up in Michigan. You're from a Roman Catholic family. Your mother was very religious and you broke from that. You went to Hillsdale College,
Mhm.
which I find a fascinating place. It's in Southwest Michigan. It's a small liberal arts college. It's a Christian college. There was an article about it in the New Yorker a while back, and I was rereading that. What made you decide to go to Hillsdale?
So Hillsdale was not Christian when I went there. I mean, it was not officially a Christian college. A lot of people who went there were Christian, and I was Catholic when I first went there. I stopped being Catholic probably after my first year there. Nothing to do with Hillsdale, just my own personal journey. But I liked that they accepted no government funding, and then also they gave me a half tuition scholarship, which turned into a full tuition scholarship with the journalism. So half of it was for academics, half of it was for journalism. My parents couldn't afford to send me away to college. So I'd be lying if I said that wasn't also a huge motivation. But I think I'm a better person for having gone to Hillsdale because it was so small. And I'm a better writer, I think, as I went there, because I would just have professors massacring my papers and spending one-on-one time with me where I wouldn't have gotten that at a big state school or anything like that. But yeah, it is interesting how it's also kind of my life. I've always been in these like conservative places of work, conservatives. And not that I'm not conservative on anything. I'm very pro Second Amendment. I'm an extreme free market capitalist, et cetera, but I'm not religious, and I am not at all socially conservative on anything.
Yes.
So,
Well, as one would presume, given our opening anecdote.
yeah, right. Yeah. But I mean, also even being open, I've been open about that,
right, of course.
Which leads me, I mean, I love drag queens, for example. Another thing about that is just going to drag queens for 1 second. Drag queens, I think, are a great example of the discourse, a problem with our discourse. And I write about this in the book. Drag queens weren't controversial for a very long time. I have loved drag queens openly and talked about it on Fox for years, and nobody cared until they became controversial.
Yeah.
Circa, maybe 2022, I think, or something like that.
Was it the story hour? What was the tipping point?
I have a hard time tracing it, but all I know is that I wrote a whole chapter in the book about, I write 2 chapters about gender. One where I'm like, I disagree with the right, and the other one where I'm like, I disagree with the left. And I write a lot about drag queens in the one about the right. And I noticed that I said, I made a joke on the show about how I'd never seen The Crown, but I would watch it if Queen Elizabeth was played by a drag queen. And I searched on social media I did an advanced search for that time period. Nobody said anything except for someone was like, oh, you should still watch it. But if I said that now, it would be like, you're disgusting, you're a groomer, you're a pedophile, which is what I hear when I talk about drag queens now, even though, again, I didn't change. It's because that they're now a marker of the other side.
Right. And drag queens are a different entity than the kind of like trans-identified
That's the other
sort
thing,
of person. I mean, it's so confusing.
It's people, I remember sitting, and I write about this in the book too. I was sitting there, we were doing a segment, and it was about a man was wearing a women's style bathing suit in an ad, and it was like a Pride release of bathing suits for Pride Month or whatever. And everybody was saying this model was trans or non-binary. And I was like, when do we decide that men wear women's clothing all the time?
Yes,
gay men,
it's a cross-dresser,
but also just sometimes men who are, like hipster men or whatever, and it's the people have conflated the two, which I don't know when that happened either.
I know. Well, look, I mean, we talk about this a lot on this podcast. And I mean, most, we don't have to go too far down into this, but most autogynephiles are not gay men. They're heterosexual men who have a paraphilia for cross-dressing.
And for me, I'm just kind of like, I'm just like live and let live and do what you want to do. But I also want to be, have what I want to do be respected as well.
Well, where are you on pronouns?
I will call you whatever you want. If you're she, her, they, them, I'll call you whatever you want. But I'm not for anything compulsory where that you have to use that language. I'm also not for a complete, just culturally overhaul of all language because of the small percentage of people who identify as trans. And I think that that's more of an activist thing, truly. I have friends who are trans, And we don't talk about that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
We talk about like stuff that just any friends would talk about. Like they're not like, hey, like I'm pregnant. They're not like, oh, hello, birthing person. That's you know what I mean? That's largely an activist thing, I think. So I'll call you whatever you want, just because like life's short and whatever, and if that makes you happy. But compulsory speech is a huge no from me.
Do your trans friends publicly admit to being friends with you?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they like my Instagram posts. Again, I don't have that many. I have like 2 friends who are, it's not that common.
Well, that's a lot. That's
Yeah, I have 2.
more than most people.
But I also think
not these
and I
days.
write about the trans issue a lot. I mean, these issues there's a lot of emotion involved on both sides. They are very good issues for politicians to gain more power and control. And I don't want to sound conspiratorial, but it's just true. I mean, fear is very motivating. And what I've tried to do when I think of my views on certain legislation where it is emotional is you just take gender out of it, and that's how I kind of decide what I think. For example, on the other side would be, you know, I'm about to have a child, right? And even if I wasn't about to have a child, any legislation where you're saying you can't share with the parents something that the kid's doing at school, I mean, take the gender out of it for a second, right? I mean, like, that's crazy. That's saying that the state has more ownership over your kids than you do. I mean, that's some creepy communist shit. So, but if you say it's to protect trans kids, then people are going to be like, oh, we have to protect there's already laws against child abuse, right?
Right.
But there's things on the other side too, where I'm opposed to a lot of DeSantis's legislation because I'm very, 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 very First Amendment. I mean, like, I don't want a single potential for something to potentially interfere. So I'll be opposed to that. So I try to take that piece out of it when I'm looking at these kinds of things.
Yeah. No, I agree for the most part about legislating, you know, gender medicine, et cetera. But at the same time, if the professional medical organizations won't step up and act responsibly, then a lot of people think there's no alternative. I waffle on this.
These things should simply just not, it's truly disgusting that politics has any bearing.
Exactly.
On these things. I mean,
Right.
it's really really awful.
I want to go back to your growing up, your intellectual development. You said that you chose Hillsdale in part because they didn't take government subsidies and funding. That's not like it's not a very common criteria for an 18-year-old looking at colleges. It's like, oh, well, you know, what's the party atmosphere?
Right.
What's the student teacher ratio? And do they take federal funding? Okay.
Yeah.
So were you like very political? Did you always know that you wanted to go into news analysis, that kind of thing?
Yeah, I've always been very political. I mean, I guess that's just how I've always been. I've always been very fired up about, you know, government intrusion into our lives. I just, it's far too much, and it really is keeping people from being able to decide for themselves what's the life that they want to live. And I've just always had an interest in it. It's hard for me to explain because it's just how I've always been. And I've always been really interested in politics, but also I've been very interested in writing and also a performer. I've always loved to be in front of people. I'm always comfortable in front of people. So I really hope to someday have a career that kind of combined all of those things, which is what I've done, obviously. So
yeah. Were most of the students like very wonkish? I mean, you know, because a lot of people in politics have talked about how they love to hire Hillsdale graduates. And I mean, certainly everybody I've ever encountered who is from there is like extremely well-versed in politics. Like, you know, a 20-year-old will sound like some, you know, 40-year-old wonk on C-SPAN or something. It's pretty amazing.
Yeah, you know, and it's we had to take a constitution class, for example. That's no matter what your major is, you take a constitution class. I feel as though I know leaps and bounds more about the Constitution than, you know, the government, people in the government, but also, you know, analysts who are lawyers. Sometimes I'm like, it's guys, did you ever read this? So yeah, I definitely stuck out though, because I would wear like pajamas to class, and, you know, young kids there would wear suits to class.
Oh, really? They were like Alex P. Keaton.
Yeah. But
You wear pajamas? Oh, you should have gone to like Smith or Mount Holyoke.
yeah, I
or
just
something.
wore, I mean, I don't know. I was in college, and I did stick out there too, because it's like, again, I was, not religious. I was not wearing a full, business casual outfit to class, or even casual, I mean, pajamas. Right. But I was always, I mean, very studious. I mean, I love reading. I love learning. I think the reason that I love writing books is because it reminds me of school, and I miss school.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is your second book.
Mhm.
Does it come easily to you, the writing? I find it, I don't know. I just handed in another book, and every single time it's just like such unbelievable pain that it's like I'm never doing this again.
Yeah, it is painful, but it's also just, I think I'm very good at expressing myself that way. It is difficult to write. I have ADHD, and also my pregnancy means that I've been off of the medication that I was on since I was 5, which is making it like really hard for me to
Oh, wow.
write. And also really hard to like fold laundry or do anything. But I just, I I love it too. The feeling when you finally get that sentence right. It's just so good. But yeah, I mean, I didn't intend to write 2 books in 2 years, but I got this idea for this book, and I think I got it out really fast. I got the idea while I was on the tour for the last book, which was last spring.
Mm.
And, I wanted it out before the election. So I'm like, all right, let's go. There's going to be this year we'll just have a baby instead of a book, I think. But
Yeah. Okay. It's
yeah.
probably the ROI might be a little better on the baby. Who knows?
Yeah, once that comes out, I hear you're supposed to hang out with them for a few months, so I'm probably going to be pretty busy with that.
How are you feeling about the discourse around family and mating and fertility and the population collapse and all of that?
Ugh, I have a lot to say about that, actually, because I'm 35, and I got pregnant the sex way, which you would think is impossible if you listen to some of the discourse, which I think is just rooted in people who, I don't know if they hate women, or they don't know women, or they are not having sex with women
Are you talking about the
themselves.
sort of red pill
Correct.
manosphere
The red pill
Twitter discourse?
manosphere,
Yeah.
which they go after me hard a lot. I don't care. I think it's funny because I am someone who's very open about, oh, I dated around a lot.
Yes,
No,
exactly.
I'm
Do you
very
disclose your body count?
no, yeah, it's not my body count, but I tell stories about, look, I had this relationship, and I don't care. That's the thing, is that they can't upset me because I'm not ashamed of it. I'm not damaged from it. It provided me with unbelievable content. And also I
Exactly.
got bored by it, and now I am just like so happy, and I love my husband, and I'm the most like, he's my favorite person. I know that now it's kind of like you're supposed to be like, oh, my husband's dumb, blah, blah, blah. He's like, no, no, no. Like, my husband's my best friend. He's my favorite person. I love him so much. But, I also think that there's a lot of focus on the women and not the fact that, it takes two. So I think I know a lot of men are not settling down with women either.
Right.
There's a lot of women who are single, who I know personally, who would love to settle down, but they can't find a guy. So I think that's the issue with that discourse, right? I mean, like I said, I mean, I've been open about this as well. As I had a doctor tell me that I probably couldn't get pregnant without medication, would only bring me up to a 10% chance per month, and because of various things. That was not accurate. Was just giving my life, and I got pregnant pretty quickly when I went off birth control. But I was very convinced that I was gonna have a miscarriage. I was very convinced because I'm old. 35 is it was geriatric, and now they had changed it to advanced maternal age, which like isn't better necessarily.
Geriatric is probably a politically incorrect
I
term in and of
guess, but
itself.
I mean,
Yes, a person with aging.
Yeah,
A person experiencing age.
I
That's how
never
like to say it.
considered that I could just have it be okay, and this baby's going to come out. But I think it's really, I'm really disgusted by a lot of that kind of discourse, because it just is so focused on the women, and it's the men who don't want to settle down a lot of the time. Not always.
Yeah,
But a
I
lot
feel
of the
like there's different cohorts sort of
Exactly.
within that red pill orbit.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's a lot of talk right now, which I actually find fascinating, among women about like, what did second wave feminism tell me that ended up being useful and what was not so useful? And why did I grow up in the 80s and the 90s being told that being a girl boss was the highest value, and here I am, and now I don't have anybody, and I wish I could be a mom, or I wish I had started earlier. All these things. I mean, there's a lot of discourse around this kind of I was sold a bill of goods by feminism um, perspective. And you obviously had a big career and you did all the things that like the ambitious little girls dream of, and now you're having a family, so it has worked out for you. But do you think that it could just as easily have not, and you would be having a sort of singing a different tune about this?
So I can say, and I write about this also in my book, that I was hesitant to have a relationship because I thought a relationship would maybe be a distraction from my career. But my career skyrocketed after I met my husband. And it's not a coincidence. It's my, it turns out when you're not worried about what this or that loser is doing, it frees up space in your brain for a lot more worthwhile
Mhm.
pursuits. And I worried about my loss of freedom. And I honestly, now that I know that I have someone who loves me truly unconditionally for who I am and who is my best friend, and I have that support at home, I feel more free to be myself than I've ever felt in my entire life. So all of the things that I was concerned about, the opposite turned out to be true. And am I'm still intending to, we're a team. I'm not going to stop working or having my career because I'm going to have this baby. Things are going to change, obviously, when you have a baby in ways that I probably don't even understand yet because I haven't done that yet. But, if you have a partner that's really a partner, as my husband is, then you have everything's better. You have I've gone further in my career. So it's the opposite of what I actually thought it would be.
Your husband obviously is very supportive of your career and he's very successful himself.
Yeah.
He's in finance, and you write
Yeah.
in the book about how you never thought you would be with a finance bro and you tried to get out of the date within 30 seconds or something.
Mhm.
Um, do you think that he's unusual though in his not being intimidated? Like, how unique is that? Because certainly a lot of women say like, I tamp it down around these guys. They don't want to hear about my ambition, or they're just not even going to bother to go on. And they're so apathetic that they can't even like fill out a dating profile on an app.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely have experienced men being threatened by my career going well. And I was also dating a lot of men who were in similar fields as me, such as creative, like of some kind, whether they were comedians, whether they were artists of some kind, actors,
Comedians are the
whatever.
best boyfriends, as we know.
They're the worst.
I know.
They're the
They're
worst.
the greatest providers and the
They're the
greatest.
worst, and I've dated many of them, and they're the worst. And but also I must be the worst.
Now, female comedians are amazing to date, I'm sure. Yeah.
But I mean, everything that had always been a struggle with other relationships with him, he's like, I love it. He loves, he's so supportive of me. And, I don't have to make myself smaller, which I felt before that I really had to do. And he's more conservative than I am on a lot of things. And we do have our differences in certain things, but it also just like doesn't matter. I don't know. I mean, he's truly the best thing that ever happened to me. And I know that's so cheesy to say. I know that it is, but I wouldn't have so many of the other things if I didn't have him in my life.
Do you think that dating apps work anymore? What do you tell young women in order to help
So,
them? What would you tell them in terms of finding a good
so
relationship?
that's how I met him, was on a dating app. But
Yeah.
here's the thing. I met a lot of people who are not my husband on this dating app too. And the only reason that I went out with him is because I was going through the dating app at home with my sister when I was home for Christmas. And she convinced me to like click the little heart button. And I was like, ew, like he's not my type. Like he was like conventionally attractive. He seemed well adjusted mentally. I was,
That sounds
and you
terrible.
get addicted to the kind of pizzazz that, untreated mental illness can add to a relationship. So and she was kind of like, okay, but like, how is that working for you? Try it out. And at first I was like, like he showed up, he's dressed in his finance douche uniform. I didn't want to I got drunk because I was just like, whatever, I can't find an excuse to get out of it. I'll just get drunk. So I had like 5 tequila sodas. I kissed him because I was drunk, and then I left. And he was really into it, I guess, at first, because he kept trying to go out with me again. And I was like, nah, like I was kind of like, I didn't have a bad time, but I was kind of just like, I don't really know. I was dating a few other people. I was like going on, just like, this is fine. My sister or my other friend were like, go out with him again. Like, just go out with him again. So I went out with him. I canceled 2 second dates. And then I gave him another chance, and he showed up a little late to the bar, and he was wearing like a hoodie and a hat. And I was like, oh, he's hot. And then we never spent another night apart after that. I mean,
so he just had to dress kind of like a slacker slob.
I mean,
in order
yeah,
to
the finance,
get you to calm
the
down.
finance douche uniform and the loafers was really a turnoff for me. And so I realized, but also I was out of my comfort zone. You know, I was kind of like, okay, I'm 30. I've been dating around for a while, you know, and it's not working. So why don't I try to do something that's the opposite of what I've been doing? And that's, you know, and that's, by the way, it's not like I was settling, because I'm so attracted to him now. I mean, I'm obsessed with him. Like, I can't wait to come home and see him every day. It's just that I, you know, needed to be in a position to step out of my comfort zone and try something else. Cause it's like, I'm always like, you're not my type. You're not my type. But he's like, you know, apparently I am. Apparently he was. He's the only one I want married. I never wanted to get married. I knew for a fact I never wanted children, I thought. And then I met him and I was like, oh, I want to have his kids.
Yeah, I think that tends to happen.
I mean, I was, even from a little girl, I was like, why do people do that?
Yeah, I'm still that way. I'm one of the few that actually stayed that way. But
yeah,
I know most,
I really
most
thought I
do
would
not.
be. I really thought I would be. Even after I got married, I was like, maybe. And then I just changed my mind.
Yeah. Well, so by way of wrapping things up here, and this has been a great conversation, I want to ask you about the 2 election scenarios. What are you most afraid of? Let's just start with a Harris. Say Kamala Harris is elected. What worries you most about that? And I guess what would give you the most hope about that?
I can probably kind of answer them both. I mean, so with Harris, what I would worry about would be a lot of her policies, right? The economic policies, some of them have been horrifying that she's put forward.
Like what, for instance, off the top of your
head? What she was even talking about with like price controls was truly one of the most horrifying things.
Oh, the grocery stores.
And the fact that she even said that out loud, I'm like, that's horrifying to me as a capitalist. I just hate this idea, you know, but it also, I don't think either of the parties are really small government, low taxes, right? That's the sad thing. It just depends on each way, you know, what you spend. And I think, you know, I sadly think that it's just going to be ugly no matter who wins, not to be too optimistic, but until we are able to heal and we're able to talk about policy, and we're able to talk about, I think there's so much focus on the people, specific people who are in power, and not the amount of power that those positions have. And we're at the point now where it's like, you can't, there's people like, even look at what's going on with Taylor Swift, where she hugged Brittany Mahomes, and people are like horrified because Brittany liked a Trump post. And I've seen things on Twitter, like, if you are a marginalized person and you were hurt by Taylor, I see you, I hear you. And it's just like, oh my God. Right. But we have to get away from that, because until we get away from that, we're not going to be able to have this conversation of what's this policy, what's that policy. Right. The polarization is bad for everyone, no matter who wins. And that's why if I thought things were going to be a lot worse from one versus the other, then I might vote for one versus the other. But then again, I might not, because it feels so good to vote third party, especially because I'm in New York, and I think we know which way New York's going to go. Yeah.
I find myself so much more worried about the reaction from the opposite party.
Exactly.
And that's such a screwed up way of looking at it. Like, I don't, if Trump wins, the resistance people are going to be out of their minds and completely hysterical for 4 years. And if Harris wins, perhaps the militias will descend upon us.
I mean, and then it's going to be, I mean, right. We've seen that now twice in the past 2 elections. I don't like the way the losing party has behaved in either of those cases.
Yeah.
So we have, I mean, it's going to be as bad as it is leading up to an election. It's going to be really bad after the election.
When does your baby due? Are you gonna time it so you'll be distracted and you can just skip the whole thing? I
really wish my due date was in November and not February. I'll tell you that. But
okay.
Sadly, that wasn't how it worked out. So I'll be pregnant, and I'll be there to have whoever telling me it's all my fault.
Okay. Well, just take it easy on yourself.
Thank you.
There's a lot at stake. All right. Well, Kat, congratulations on the book. I used to like you until, and congratulations on your impending motherhood.
Thank you.
Thanks for talking with me. This has been a great conversation.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
That was my conversation with writer, comedian, news analyst, Kat Timpf. Her new book is I Used to Like You Until: How Binary Thinking Divides Us. This is the Unspeakable Podcast, now on YouTube. If you are just finding me here, welcome. It's nice to meet you. If you would like to get even more content, you can become a paying subscriber to my Substack, meghandaum.substack.com, or just the Unspeakable Podcast on Substack. That gets you 2 entirely extra bonus episodes per month, and also discounts on merch, access to my own writing, all kinds of good stuff. So go over there. In the meantime, if you are enjoying the channel, please like, subscribe, leave a comment, nice one, share it with friends, all that kind of stuff. I will be back next week with another super nuanced guest. See you then.